Okay. So magandang tanghali po sa lahat at ito na naman si Lolo Ray para sa isa na namang edisyon ng pagbabasa-basa natin ng mga batas, no? At susubukan natin itong ipaliwanag in layman's term. Ang babasahin naman natin ngayon ay may kinalaman sa taxation, no? Kumbaga yung pinaka-biblia ng taxation, which is yung National Internal Revenue Code o yung Tax Reform Act of 1997. Babasahin natin yan. Yun nga lamang, maraming nagawang kung nanonood kayo ng news ng mga nagdaan, mga unang 2 taon ng pamamahala ni Pangulong Duterte, na naging batas yung tinatawag natin na train law. Itong train law na ito, nagkaroon siya ng epekto dun sa iba't ibang mga provisions ng ating National Internal Revenue Code. So, ang ginawa ko para subukan kong ipaliwanag sa ating lahat, inilista ko yung mga provision kung saan siya nagkaroon ng pagbabago. Naging basihan ko itong comparison of NIRC 1997 and yun ang RA 10963 o yung train law. Nakahanap ako rito sa internet. So, subukan natin siyang basahin tapos yung National Internal Revenue Code at yung mga pagbabagong idinulot ng train law sa taxation ng ating bansa. Simulan na natin. Okay, basahin natin yung Section 1. This act shall be cited as the Tax Reform Act of 1997. State policy, it is hereby declared the policy of the state to promote sustainable economic growth through the rationalization of the Philippine Internal Revenue Tax System, including tax administration, to provide as much as possible an equitable relief to a greater number of taxpayers, in order to improve levels of disposable income and increase economic activity, and to create a robust environment for business to enable firms to compete better in the regional as well as the global market. Okay. At the same time, that the state ensures that the government is able to provide for the needs of those under its jurisdiction and care. Section 3, PD number 1158 is amended by, among others, PD 1994 and EO 273, otherwise known as the National Internal Revenue Code, is hereby further amendment. So, tong Tax Reform Act na ito, inamyendahan niya yung mga marami nating batas sa pagbubuwis at yung National Internal Revenue Code. Yun nga lang, kagaya nga na sinasabi ko kanina, as of President Duterte's pag-upo, nagkaroon ng train law. So, mamaya i-incorporate na lang natin siya sa ating pagbabasa. Babasahin na lang natin siya if iisang libro lang siya na walang pinagkaiba. Naisingit na natin yung mga provisions ng train law. Title 1, Organizational and Function of the Bureau of Internal Revenue. Okay. Powers and duties. Okay. Of the Bureau of Internal Revenue. The BIR shall be under the supervision and control of the Department of Finance, and its powers and duties shall comprehend the assessment and collection of all national internal revenue taxes, fees and charges, and the enforcement of all forfeitures, penalties, and fines connected therewith, including the execution of judgments in all cases decided in its favor by the Court of Tax Appeals and the ordinary courts. The Bureau shall give effect to and administer the supervisory and police powers conferred to it by this code or other laws. Section 3, Chief Officials of the Bureau of Internal Revenue. The Bureau of Internal Revenue shall have a chief to be known as Commissioner of Internal Revenue, hereinafter referred to as the Commissioner, and 4 assistant chiefs to be known as Deputy Commissioner. Okay. So ano nga ba yung mga powers ng Commissioner, no? Section 4, the power of the Commissioner to interpret tax laws and decide tax cases. The power to interpret the provisions of this code and other tax laws shall be under the exclusive and original jurisdiction of the Commissioner, subject to review by the Secretary of Finance. The power to decide disputed assessments, refunds of internal revenue taxes, fees or other charges, penalties imposed in relation thereto, or other matters arising under this code or other laws, or portions thereof administered by the Bureau of Internal Revenue, is vested in the Commissioner, subject to the exclusive appellate jurisdiction of the Court of Tax Appeals. Okay, so ibig niya lang sabihin po, ang kapangyarihan na mag-interpret ng mga provision ng code na ito ay nasa BIR, no? Exclusive and original jurisdiction of the BIR, sabi niya. The power to decide disputed assessments, mga refund, no? Ng internal revenue taxes, mga charges, penalties na may kinalaman doon, and other matters na may kinalaman sa batas na ito, itong ang National Internal Revenue Code, ay nasa kapangyarihan ng Commissioner. At pag aapila ka sa Court of Tax Appeals. Section 5, ayan. Yan na yung merong pagbabagong nagawa yung train law. Okay, so basahin natin, no? Section 5, the power of the Commissioner to obtain information and to summon, examine, and take testimony of persons. So basahin natin siya as if incorporated yung train law, no? In ascertaining the correctness of any return or in making a return when none has been made, or in determining the liability of any person for any internal revenue tax, or in collecting any such liability, or in evaluating tax compliance, the Commissioner is authorized, letter A, to examine any book, paper, record, or other data which may be relevant or material to such inquiry. Letter B, to obtain on a regular basis from any person other than the person whose internal revenue tax liability is subject to audit or investigation, or from any officer of the national and local governments, government agencies, and instrumentalities, including the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas and government-owned or controlled corporations, any information such as, but not limited to, costs and volume of production, receipts or sales and gross incomes of taxpayers, and the names, addresses, and financial statements of corporations, mutual fund companies, insurance companies, regional operating headquarters of multinational companies, joint accounts, associations, joint ventures of consortia and registered partnerships and their members. Ito na yung dinagdag ng train law. Provided that the Cooperative Development Authority shall submit to the Bureau a tax incentive report which shall include information on the income tax, value-added tax, and other tax incentives availed of by cooperatives registered and enjoying incentives under RA 6938 as amended. Provided further that the information submitted by the Cooperative Development Authority to the Bureau shall be submitted to the Department of Finance and shall be included in the database created under RA 10708, otherwise known as the Tax Incentives Management and Transparency Act. Okay, ano namang lohika nito mga ito? Magsusumiti daw yung Cooperative Development Authority sa Bureau of Tax, di ba? Ang tawag dito? Bureau of Internal Revenue, BIR. Ipapasa rin naman daw ito sa Department of Finance. Bakit? Kasi di ba nga yung Department of Finance ay may supervisory power over the BIR, di ba? Tapos ilalagay daw nila ito doon sa database ng Department of Finance. Okay. Yung database na yun ay nilikha ng RA 10708, otherwise known as the Tax Incentives Management and Transparency Act, o yung TIMTA. O, di ba? Letter C, to summon the person liable for tax or required to file a return, or any officer or employee of such person, or any person having possession, custody, or care of the books of accounts and other accounting records containing entries relating to the business of the person liable for tax or any other person to appear before the Commissioner or his duly authorized representative at the time and place specified in the summons, and to produce such books, papers, records, or other data, and to give testimony. Ayan, o letter D. To take such testimony of the person concerned under oath as may be relevant or material to such inquiry. And letter E. To cause revenue officers and employees to make a canvass from time to time of any revenue district or region, and inquire after and concerning all persons therein who may be liable to pay any internal revenue tax, and all persons owning or having the care, management, or possession of any object with respect to which a tax is imposed. The provisions of the foregoing paragraphs, notwithstanding nothing in this section, shall be construed as granting the Commissioner the authority to inquire into bank deposits other than as provided for in Section 6F of this code. So may kapangyarihan si Commissioner ng BIR na mag-inquire into bank deposits. Maliban na lamang daw dun sa nakalagay sa Section 6F nitong code na ito. Ano naman yung Section 6F na yun? Subukan natin basahin kasi malapit na lang naman, no? Dali Hanap natin Section 6 F. Ito yun. A statement that, sandali. Section 6 D, E, hirap hanapin. Sorry, wait. D, E. Okay, hindi ko na nahanap. Mamaya na lang, pupuntahan din naman natin yan. Babasahin din naman natin. Okay, magtungo na tayo rito sa Section 6. Meron ding pagbabagong dinala dito, ang train law. The power of the Commissioner to make assessments and prescribe additional requirements to tax administration and enforcement. Letter A. Examination of return and determination of tax due after a return has been filed as required under the provisions of this code. The Commissioner or his duly authorized representative may authorize the examination of any taxpayer and the assessment of the correct amount of tax. Ito na yung bago. Notwithstanding any law requiring the prior authorization of any government agency or instrumentality. Provided, however, that failure to file a return shall not prevent the Commissioner from authorizing the examination of any taxpayer. The tax or any deficiency tax so assessed shall be paid upon notice and demand from the Commissioner or from his duly authorized representative. Any return, statement of declaration filed in any office authorized to receive the same shall not be withdrawn, provided that within 3 years from the date of such filing, the same may be modified, changed, or amended. Provided further that no notice for audit or investigation of such return, statement, or declaration has in the meantime been actually served upon the taxpayer. Letter B. Failure to submit required returns, statements, reports, and other documents. Section 6 pa rin to Sabi rito, when a report required by law as a basis for the assessment of any national internal revenue tax not be forthcoming within the time fixed by laws or rules and regulations, or when there is reason to believe that any such report is false, incomplete, or erroneous, the Commissioner shall assess the proper tax on the best evidence obtainable. In case a person fails to file a required return or other document at the time prescribed by law, or willfully or otherwise files a false or fraudulent return or other document, the Commissioner shall make or amend the return from his own knowledge and from such information as he can obtain through testimony or otherwise, which shall be prima facie correct and sufficient for all legal purposes. Letter C, Section 6 pa rin to. Authority to conduct inventory taking, surveillance, and to prescribe presumptive gross sales and receipts. Sabi rito, the Commissioner may at any time during the taxable year order inventory taking of goods of any taxpayer as a basis for determining his internal revenue tax liabilities, or may place the business operations of any person, natural or juridical, under observation or surveillance if there is reason to believe that such person is not declaring his correct income, sales, or receipts for internal revenue tax purposes. The findings may be used as the basis for assessing the taxes for the other months or quarters of the same or different taxable years, and such assessments shall be deemed prima facie correct. When it is found that the person has failed to issue receipts and invoices in violation of the requirements of Section 113 and 237 of this code, or when there is a reason to believe that the books or accounts or other records do not correctly reflect the declarations made or to be made in a return required to be filed under the provisions of this code, the Commissioner, after taking into account the sales receipts, income, or other taxable base of other persons engaged in similar business. Ay, wait lang. Yan. Under similar situations or circumstances, or after considering other relevant information, si Commissioner nga daw may prescribe a minimum amount of such gross receipts, sales, and taxable base, and such amount so prescribed shall be prima facie correct for purposes of determining the internal revenue tax liabilities of such person. Letter D. Section 6 pa rin ito Authority to terminate taxable period. When it shall come to the knowledge of the Commissioner that a taxpayer is retiring from business subject to tax, or is intending to leave the Philippines or to remove his property therefrom, or to hide or conceal his property, or is performing any act tending to obstruct the proceedings for the collection of the tax for the past or current quarter or year, or to render the same totally or partly ineffective unless such proceedings are begun immediately, the Commissioner shall declare the tax period of such taxpayer terminated at any time, and shall send the taxpayer a notice of such decision, together with a request for the immediate payment of the tax for the period so declared terminated, and the tax for the preceding year or quarter, or such portion thereof as may be unpaid, and said taxes shall be due and payable immediately, and shall be subject to all the penalties hereafter prescribed, unless paid, unless paid within the time fixed in the demand by the Commissioner. Letter E, Section 6 pa rin. Ito, may pagbabago rito ng konti sa train law. Authority of the Commissioner to prescribe real property values. The Commissioner is hereby authorized to divide the Philippines into different zones or areas, and shall upon mandatory, yan ay nilagay ng train law, mandatory consultation with competent appraisers both for the private and public sectors, determine the fair market value of real properties located in each zone or area. Ito na yung dinagdag. Subject to automatic adjustment once every 3 years through rules and regulations issued by the Secretary of Finance based on the current Philippine valuation standards, provided that no adjustment in zonal valuation shall be valid unless published in a newspaper of general circulation in the province, city, or municipality concerned, or in the absence thereof shall be posted in the provincial capital, city, or municipal hall, and in 2 other conspicuous public places therein. Provided further that the basis of any valuation, including the records of consultations done, shall be public records open to the inquiry of any taxpayer. For purposes of computing any internal revenue tax, the value of the property shall be whichever is higher. Number 1, the fair market value as determined by the Commissioner, or number 2, the fair market value as shown in the schedule of values of the provincial and city assessors. Magtungo naman tayo sa letter F, section 6 pa rin. Okay. Authority of the Commissioner to inquire into bank deposit accounts and other related information held by financial institutions. Notwithstanding any contrary provision of Republic Act 1405, RA 6426, otherwise known as the Foreign Currency Deposit Act of the Philippines, and other general or special laws, the Commissioner is hereby authorized to inquire into the bank deposits and other related information held by financial institutions of, number 1, a decedent to determine his gross estate. Ayan, yung isang namayapa, no? Number 2, any taxpayer who has filed an application for compromise of his tax liability under Section 204A, number 2 of this code by reason of financial incapacity to pay his tax liability. So, yung mga nakikipagkompromiso raw dahil hindi nila mabayaran yung tax liability nila dahil sa financial problem. Ganun na lang, no? In case a taxpayer files an application to compromise the payment of his tax liabilities, on his claim that his financial position demonstrates a clear inability to pay the tax assessed, his application shall not be considered unless and until he waives in writing his privilege under RA 1405, RA 6426, otherwise known as the Foreign Currency Deposit Act of the Philippines, or under other general or special laws, and such waiver shall constitute the authority of the Commissioner to inquire into the bank deposits of the taxpayer. So, isa ito siguro doon sa sinasabi kanina na pag nag-waiver, unless i-waive niya, pag hindi niya winave, hindi pa rin pwedeng tignan ni Commissioner yung bank records niya. Pero dito nga sa provision ng batas, pwede niya namang i-waive. Pag winave niya na, okay, yung kanyang Foreign Currency Deposit Act, ganyan. Pwede na itong yung kanyang foreign currency deposits. Ayon dito nga sa Foreign Currency Deposit Act at winave niya yung rights niya, right to secrecy, no? Pwede nang silipin ni Commissioner yung kanyang bank deposits. Ikatatlo, a specific taxpayer or taxpayer subject of a request for the supply of tax information from a foreign tax authority pursuant to an international convention or agreement on tax matters to which the Philippines is a signatory or a party of, provided that the information obtained from the banks and other financial institutions may be used by the Bureau of Internal Revenue for tax assessment, verification, audit, and enforcement purposes. In case of a request from a foreign tax authority for tax information held by banks and financial institutions, the exchange of information shall be done in a secure manner to ensure confidentiality thereof under such rules and regulations as may be promulgated by the Secretary of Finance upon recommendation of the Commissioner. The Commissioner shall provide the tax information obtained from banks and financial institutions pursuant to a convention or agreement upon request of the Foreign Tax Authority when such requesting Foreign Tax Authority has provided the following information to demonstrate the foreseeable relevance of the information to the request. Okay. Letter A, identity of the person under examination or information. Letter B, a statement of the information being sought, including its nature and the form in which the said foreign tax authority prefers to receive the information from the Commissioner. Letter C, the tax purpose for which the information is being sought. Letter D, grounds for believing that the information requested is held in the Philippines or is in the possession or control of a person within the jurisdiction of the Philippines. Letter E, to the extent known, the name and address of any person believed to be in possession of the requested information. Letter F, a statement that the request is in conformity with the law and administrative practices of the said foreign tax authority, such that if the requested information was within the jurisdiction of the said foreign tax authority, then it would be able to obtain the information under its laws or in the normal course of administrative practice, and that it is in conformity with a convention or international agreement. And letter G, the statement that the requesting foreign tax authority has exhausted all the means available in its own territory to obtain information except those that would give rise to disproportionate difficulties. So, nakikisuyo sa atin ang foreign authorities dito para mabigyan ng impormasyon galing kay BIR Commissioner, no? The Commissioner shall forward the information as promptly as possible to the requesting foreign tax authority. To ensure a prompt response, the Commissioner shall confirm receipt of a request in writing to the requesting tax authority and shall notify the latter of deficiencies in the request, kung meron man, if any daw, within 60 days from the receipt of the request. If the Commissioner is unable to obtain and provide the information within 90 days from receipt of request due to obstacles encountered in furnishing the information, or when the bank or financial institution refuses to furnish the information, he shall immediately inform the requesting tax authority of the same, explaining the nature of the obstacles encountered or the reasons for refusal. The term foreign tax authority, as used herein, shall refer to the tax authority or tax administration of the requesting state under the tax treaty or convention to which the Philippines is a signatory or part of. Kailangan itong foreign tax authority nito kaparehas nating signatory sa tax treaty. O letter G ng section 6 pa rin. Authority to administer tax agents. Sabi niya rito, the Commissioner shall accredit and register based on their professional competence, integrity, and moral fitness individuals in general professional partnerships and their representatives who prepare and file tax returns, statements, reports, protests, and other papers with or who appear before the Bureau for taxpayers. Within 120 days from January 1, 1998, the Commissioner shall create the national and regional accreditation boards, the members of which shall serve for 3 years and shall designate from among the senior officials of the Bureau one chairman. So meron daw isang chairman doon sa National and Regional Accreditation Board and 2 members for each board, subject to such rules and regulations as the Secretary of Finance shall promulgate upon the recommendation of the Commissioner. Individuals in general professional partnerships and their representatives who are denied accreditation by the Commissioner and or the National and Regional Accreditation Boards may appeal such denial to the Secretary of Finance, who shall rule on the appeal within 60 days from receipt of such appeal. Failure of the Secretary of Finance to rule on the appeal within the prescribed period shall be deemed as approval of the application for accreditation of the appellant. And letter H ng ating section 6 pa rin, no? Authority of the Commissioner to prescribe additional procedural or documentary requirements. The Commissioner may prescribe the manner of compliance with any documentary or procedural requirement in connection with the submission or preparation of financial statements accompanying the tax returns. Okay. Okay, so doon nagtatapos yung ating Section 6. So, balik na naman tayo dito sa National Internal Revenue Code kasi may konting pagbabago nga. Section 6, no? Section 7, walang pagbabago. Handa na tayo rito. Section 7, to. Authority of the Commissioner to delegate power. The Commissioner may delegate the powers vested in him under the pertinent provisions of this code to any or such subordinate officials with the rank equivalent to a division chief or higher, subject to such limitations and restrictions as may be imposed under rules and regulations to be promulgated by the Secretary of Finance upon recommendation of the Commissioner. So may kapangyarihan pala si Kume na i-delegate ang kanyang power dun sa mga may ranggo ng division chief o mas mataas pa. Pero yun ay subject sa limitasyon ng gagawing regulasyon ng Secretary of Finance. The following powers of the Commissioner shall not be delegated. Ito lang yung mga hindi niya pwedeng i-delegate. Letter A, the power to recommend the promulgation of rules and regulations by the Secretary of Finance. Letter B, the power to issue rulings of first impression or to reverse, revoke, or modify any existing ruling of the Bureau. Letter C, the power to compromise or abate under Section 204A and B of this code. Yung mga tax liability, no? The power to compromise or abate any tax liability, powers lang yan ni Commissioner. Provided, however, that assessments issued by the regional offices involving basic deficiency taxes of 500,000 pesos or less and minor criminal violations as may be determined by rules and regulations to be promulgated by the Secretary of Finance upon recommendation of the Commissioner, discovered by the regional and district officials may be compromised by a regional evaluation board which shall be composed of the Regional Director as Chairman, Assistant Regional Director, the heads of the Legal, Assessment and Collection Division, and the Revenue District Officer having jurisdiction over the taxpayer as members. Sila yung mga members. And letter D, hindi pwedeng i-delegate ito ni Commissioner yung the power to assign or reassign internal revenue officers to establishments where articles subject to excise tax are produced or kept. Okay. Hindi niya pwedeng i-delegate yun kasi baka pag dinelegate niya yun, ipaglalagay nila yung mga bata nila doon para sila ang mamahala doon sa mga may mga excise taxes, di ba? Excise taxes, maraming corruption dyan, di ba? Kasi yan yung mga buwis to enjoy, di ba? Taxes for the enjoyment. Section 8. Duty of the Commissioner to ensure the provision and distribution of forms, receipts, certificates, and appliances in the acknowledgement of payment of taxes. Letter A. Provision and distribution to proper officials. It shall be the duty of the Commissioner, among other things, to prescribe, provide, and distribute to the proper officials the requisite licenses, internal revenue stamps, labels, and all other forms, certificates, bonds, records, invoices, books, receipts, instruments, appliances, and apparatus used in administering the laws falling within the jurisdiction of the Bureau. For this purpose, internal revenue stamps, strip stamps, and labels shall be caused by the Commissioner to be printed with adequate security features. Internal revenue stamps, whether of a barcode or fusion design, shall be firmly and conspicuously affixed on each pack of cigars and cigarettes subject to excise tax in the manner and form as prescribed by the Commissioner upon approval of the Secretary of Finance. And letter B ng Section 8, it shall be the duty of the Commissioner or his duly authorized representative or an authorized agent bank to whom any payment of any tax is made under the provision of this code to acknowledge, and duty of the Commissioner to acknowledge the payment of such tax, expressing the amount paid in the particular account for which such payment was made in a form and manner prescribed therefore by the Commissioner. Section 9. Internal Revenue Districts. With the approval of the Secretary of Finance, the Commissioner shall divide the Philippines into such number of revenue districts as may from time to time be required for administrative purposes. Each of these districts, yung revenue districts, shall be under the supervision of a revenue district officer. Section 10, yung Revenue Regional Director. Under rules and regulations, policies, and standards formulated by the Commissioner, with the approval of the Secretary of Finance, the Revenue Regional Director shall, within the region and district offices under his jurisdiction, among others, letter A, implement laws, policies, plans, programs, rules, and regulations of the department or agencies in the regional area. Letter B, administer and enforce internal revenue laws and rules and regulations, including the assessment and collection of all internal revenue taxes, charges, and fees. Letter C, issue letters of authority for the examination of taxpayers within the region. Letter D, provide economical, efficient, and effective service to the people in the area. Letter E, coordinate with regional offices or other departments, bureaus, and agencies in the area. Letter F, coordinate with local government units in the area. Letter G, exercise control and supervision over the officers and employees within the region. And letter H, perform such other functions as may be provided by law and as may be delegated by the Commissioner. Yun ang Revenue Regional Director. Section 11. Duties of Revenue District Officers and other internal revenue officers. Ano ba yung mga duty nila? To ensure that all laws and rules and regulations affecting national internal revenue are faithfully executed and complied with, and to aid in the prevention, detection, and punishment of frauds, of delinquencies in connection therewith. Duty rin daw ng bawat revenue district officer to examine the efficiency of all officers and employees of the Bureau of Internal Revenue under his supervision, and to report in writing to the commissioner through the regional director any neglect of duty, incompetency, delinquency, or malfeasance in office of any internal revenue officer, of which he may obtain knowledge with a statement of all the facts and any evidence sustaining each case. Section 12. Agents and deputies for collection of national internal revenue taxes. The following are hereby constituted agents of the Commissioner. Letter A, the Commissioner of Customs and his subordinates with respect to the collection of national internal revenue taxes or imported goods. Letter B, the head of the appropriate government office and his subordinates with respect to collection of energy tax. No? Yung isa sa customs, taxes sa imported goods. Ito naman, collection of energy tax. Letter C, banks duly accredited by the Commissioner with respect to receipt of payments, internal revenue taxes authorized to be made through bank. Any officer or employee of an authorized agent bank assigned to receive internal revenue tax payments and transmit tax returns or documents to the Bureau of Internal Revenue shall be subject to the same sanctions and penalties prescribed in Section 269 and 270 of this code. Section 13. Authority of Revenue Offices. No. Ito ay subject to the rules and regulations prescribed by the Secretary of Finance upon recommendation of the Commissioner lagi. A revenue officer assigned to perform assessment functions in any district may, pursuant to a letter of authority issued by the Revenue Regional Director, examine taxpayers within the jurisdiction of the district in order to collect the correct amount of tax or to recommend the assessment of any deficiency tax due in the same manner that the said acts could have been performed by the regional director, by the revenue regional director himself. Sinubukan ko mag-black coffee. Hindi masarap, pero okay lang naman. Kaya naman. Okay, Section 14. Authority of officers to administer oaths and take testimony. The Commissioner, Deputy Commissioners, Service Chiefs, Assistant Service Chiefs, Revenue Regional Directors, Assistant Revenue Regional Directors, Chiefs and Assistant Chiefs of Divisions, Revenue District Officers, Special Deputies of the Commissioner, Internal Revenue Officers, and any other employee of the Bureau thereunto especially deputized by the Commissioner shall have the power to administer oaths and to take testimony in any official matter or investigation conducted by them regarding matters within the jurisdiction of the Bureau. Section 15. Authority of Internal Revenue Officers to make arrests and seizures. The Commissioner, the Deputy Commissioners, the Revenue Regional Directors, the Revenue District Officers, and other Internal Revenue Officers shall have authority to make arrests and seizures for the violation of any penal law, rule, or regulation administered by the Bureau of Internal Revenue. Any person so arrested shall be forthwith brought before a court, there to be dealt with according to law. Section 16. Assignment of Internal Revenue Officers involved in excise tax functions to establishments where articles subject to excise tax are produced or kept. The Commissioner shall employ, assign, or reassign Internal Revenue Officers involved in excise tax functions as often as the exigencies of the Revenue Service may require. to establishments or places where articles subject to excise tax are produced or kept, provided that an internal revenue officer assigned to any such establishment shall in no case stay in his assignment for more than 2 years, subject to rules and regulations to be prescribed by the Secretary of Finance upon recommendation of the Commissioner. Section 17. Assignment of Internal Revenue Officers and other employees to other duties. The Commissioner may, subject to the provisions of Section 16 and the laws on civil service, as well as the rules and regulations to be prescribed by the Secretary of Finance upon the recommendation of the Commissioner, assign or reassign Internal Revenue Officers and employees of the Bureau of Internal Revenue without change in their official rank and salary to other or special duties connected with the enforcement or administration of the revenue laws as the exigencies of the service may require, provided that internal revenue officers assigned to perform assessment or collection function shall not remain in the same assignment for more than 3 years. Provided further that assignment of internal revenue officers and employees of the Bureau of Special Duties shall not exceed 1 year. So yung internal revenue officers, hindi sila lalagpas ng 3 years. At yung internal revenue officers and employees of the Bureau of Special Duties, hindi sila lalagpas ng 1 year. Yung una, yung tinutukoy ko, yung internal revenue officers assigned to perform assessment or collection, 3 years sila. Yan. Hindi sila lalagpas ng 3 years. Section 18, reports of violation of laws. When an internal revenue officer discovers evidence of a violation of this code or of any law, rule, or regulation administered by the Bureau of Internal Revenue of such character as to warrant the institution of criminal proceedings, he shall immediately report the facts to the Commissioner through his immediate superior, giving the name and address of the offender and the names of the witnesses if possible, provided that in urgent cases, the Revenue Regional Director or Revenue District Officer, as the case may be, may send the report to the corresponding prosecuting officer. In the latter case, a copy of his report shall be sent to the Commissioner. Section 19. Contents of Commissioner's Annual Report. Okay. The annual report of the Commissioner shall contain detailed statements of the collections of the Bureau with specifications of the sources of revenue by type of tax, by manner of payment, by revenue region, and by industry group, and its disbursements by classes of expenditures. In case the actual collection exceeds or falls short of target as set in the annual national budget by 15%, kinulang dun sa target, or more, the Commissioner shall explain the reason for such excess or shortfall. Section 20. Submission of report and pertinent information by the Commissioner. Letter A. Submission of pertinent information to Congress. Yan. The power of Section 270 of this code, to the contrary, notwithstanding, the Commissioner shall, upon request of Congress and in aid of legislation, furnish its appropriate committee pertinent information including, but not limited to, industry audits, collection performance data, status reports and criminal actions initiated against persons and taxpayers' returns, provided, however, that any return or return information which can be associated with or otherwise identified directly or indirectly a particular taxpayer shall be furnished to the appropriate committee of Congress only when sitting in executive session, unless such taxpayer otherwise consents in writing to such disclosure. And letter B ng Section 20, report to Oversight Committee. The Commissioner shall, with reference to Section 204 of this Code, submit to the Oversight Committee referred to in Section 290 hereof, through the Chairman of the Committee on Ways and Means of the Senate and House of Representatives, a report on the exercise of his powers pursuant to the said section every 6 months of each calendar year. So magre-report ka sa Kongreso at magre-report ka sa Oversight Committee ng Senate and House of Representatives. Section 21. Sources of revenue. The following taxes, fees, and charges are deemed to be national internal revenue taxes. Ito yung mga national internal revenue taxes. Income tax, estate and donors tax, value-added tax. Letter D, other percentage taxes. Letter E, excise taxes. Letter F, documentary stamp taxes. And letter G, such other taxes as are or hereafter may be imposed and collected by the Bureau of Internal Revenue. Punta naman tayo sa Title 2, yung tax on income. Okay, definition, Section 22. Letter A, the term person means an individual, a trust, estate, or corporation. Letter B, the term corporation shall include partnerships, no matter how created or organized, joint stock companies, joint accounts o yung tinatawag na kwentas en partisipasyon, association or insurance companies, but does not include general professional partnership, hindi siya kasali, and the joint venture or consortium formed for the purpose of undertaking construction projects or engaging in petroleum, coal, geothermal, and other energy operations pursuant to an operating consortium agreement under a service contract with the government. General professional partnerships are partnerships formed by persons for the sole purpose of exercising their common profession, no part of the income of which is derived from engaging in any trade or business. Letters, so hindi kasali yon sa term na corporation, yung mga partnership. Ang laging example ko dyan, yung law firm, yung partnership ng mga abogado para kumita in the exercise of their business. Hindi naman na sila nag-engage in any other trade or business. So hindi sila kasali sa term na corporation for this act. Okay, Section C. The term Section C. Letter C ng Section 22 pa rin tayo, no? The term domestic, when applied to a corporation, means created or organized in the Philippines or under its laws. Letter D, the term foreign, when applied to a corporation, means a corporation which is not domestic. Letter E, the term non-resident citizen means, number 1, a citizen of the Philippines who establishes to the satisfaction of the Commissioner the fact of his physical presence abroad with a definite intention to reside therein. Ikalawa, a citizen of the Philippines who leaves the Philippines during the taxable year to reside abroad, either as an immigrant or for employment on a permanent basis. Number 3, a citizen of the Philippines who works and derives income from abroad and whose employment thereat requires him to be physically present abroad most of the time during the taxable year. Number 4, a citizen who has been previously considered as non-resident citizen and who arrives in the Philippines at any time during the taxable year to reside permanently in the Philippines shall likewise be treated as a non-resident citizen for the taxable year in which he arrives in the Philippines with respect to his income derived from sources abroad until the date of his arrival in the Philippines. Number 5, the taxpayer shall submit proof to the Commissioner to show his intention of leaving the Philippines to reside permanently abroad or to return to and reside in the Philippines as the case may be for the purpose of this section. So yun po yung mga non-resident citizen. O ano pa yung ibang definition of terms? The term resident alien means an individual whose residence is within the Philippines and who is not a citizen thereof. Hindi siya citizen natin pero dito siya nakatira. Letter G, the term non-resident alien means an individual whose residence is not within the Philippines and who is not a citizen. Letter H, the term resident foreign corporation applies to foreign corporation engaged in trade or business within the Philippines. Letter I, the term non-resident foreign corporation applies to foreign corporation not engaged in business or trade within the Philippines. Letter J, the term fiduciary means a guardian, trustee, executor, administrator, receiver, conservator or any person acting in any fiduciary capacity for any person. Letter K. The term withholding agent means any person required to deduct and withhold any tax under provisions of Section 57. Letter L. The term shares of stock shall include shares of stock of a corporation, warrants and or options to purchase shares of stock, as well as units of participation in a partnership, except general professional partnerships. Joint stock companies, kasali yan. Joint accounts, joint ventures, taxable as corporations, associations and recreation of amusement clubs such as golf, polo, or similar clubs, mga golf club, and mutual fund certificates. Letter M, the term shareholder daw. Ibig sabihin niya, it shall include holders of a share of stock, warrants and or options to purchase shares of stock of a corporation, as well as a holder of a unit of participation in a partnership, again, except general professional partnerships, in a joint stock company, a joint account, a taxable joint venture, a member of an association, recreation or amusement club such as golf, polo, or similar clubs, and the holder of a mutual fund certificate, a member in an association, joint stock company, or insurance company. Letter N, the term taxpayer means any person subject to tax imposed by this title. Letter O, the terms including and includes, when used in a definition contained in this title, shall not be deemed to exclude other things otherwise within the meaning of the term defined. Letter P, the term taxable year means the calendar year or the fiscal year ending during such calendar year upon the basis of which the net income is computed under this title. Taxable year includes, in the case of a return made for a fractional part of a year under the provisions of this title or under rules and regulations prescribed by the Secretary of Finance upon recommendation of the Commissioner, the period for which such return is made. Letter Q, the term fiscal year means an accounting period of 12 months ending on the last day of any month other than December. Letter R, the terms paid or incurred and paid or accrued shall be construed according to the method of accounting upon the basis of which the net income is computed under this title. Letter S, the term trade or business includes the performance of the functions of a public office. Letter T, the term securities means shares of stock in a corporation and rights to subscribe for or to receive such shares. The term includes bonds, debentures, notes, or certificates or other evidence or indebtedness issued by any corporation, including those issued by a government or political subdivision thereof, with interest coupons or in registered form. Letter U, the term dealer in securities means a merchant of stocks or securities, whether an individual, partnership, or corporation with an established place of business regularly engaged in the purchase of securities and the resale thereof to customers. That is, one who, as a merchant, buys securities and resells them to customers with a view to the gains and profits that may be derived therefrom. Letter V, the term bank means every banking institution as defined in Section 2 of RA 337 as amended, otherwise known as the General Banking Act. A bank may either be a commercial, a thrift bank, a development bank, a rural bank, or a specialized government bank. W, the term non-bank financial intermediary means a financial intermediary as defined in Section 2DC of Republic Act 337 as amended, otherwise known as the General Banking Act, authorized by the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas to perform quasi-banking activities. Di sila bangko, pero authorized sila to perform quasi-banking activities. Yan naman yung quasi-banking activities means borrowing of funds from 20 or more personal or corporate lenders at any one time through the issuance, endorsement, or acceptance of debt instruments of any kind other than deposits for the borrower's own account, or through the issuance of certificates of assignment or similar instruments with recourse or of repurchase agreements for purposes of relending or purchasing receivables and other similar obligations, provided, however, that commercial, industrial, and other non-financial companies which borrow funds through any of these means for the limited purpose of financing their own needs or the needs of their agents or dealers shall not be considered as performing quasi-banking functions. Okay, letter Y, the term deposit substitutes shall mean an alternative from obtaining funds from the public. Okay. The term public means borrowing from 20 or more individual or corporate lenders at any one time. Other than deposits, through the issuance, endorsement, or acceptance of debt instruments for the borrower's own account for the purpose of relending or purchasing of receivables and other obligations, or financing their own needs or the needs of their agent or dealer. Okay. These instruments, yung deposit substitutes, may include but need not be limited to bankers' acceptances, promissory notes, repurchases agreements, including reverse repurchase agreements, entered. Muna tayo sa ordinary income. Includes any gain from the sale or exchange of property which is not a capital asset or property described in Section 39A1. Sabi niya, any gain from the sale or exchange of property which is treated or considered as ordinary income shall be treated as gain from the sale or exchange of property which is not a capital asset as defined in Section 39. The term ordinary loss includes any loss from the sale or exchange of property which is not a capital asset. Capital asset kasi, ang ibig sabihin yan, yung ah, hindi mo siya ginagamit sa negosyo. Kunwari, nakatenggang lupain, yan. Any loss from the sale or exchange of property which is treated or considered under other provisions of this title as ordinary loss shall be treated as loss from the sale or exchange of property which is not a capital asset. The term rank and file employees shall mean all employees who are holding neither managerial nor supervisory position. Mutual fund company naman shall mean an open-end and closed-end investment company as defined under the Investment Company Act. Open-end and closed-end. So ito mutual fund siguro, ito yung mga closed-end, yung credit card, open-end, yung whatever, basta ito yung mga nagpapautang. The term trade, business, or profession shall not include performance of services by the taxpayer as an employee. Regional or area headquarters shall mean a branch established in the Philippines by multinational companies and which headquarters do not earn or derive income from the Philippines and which act as supervisory communications and coordinating center for their affiliates, subsidiaries, or branches in the Asia-Pacific region and other foreign markets. The term regional operating headquarters shall mean a branch established in the Philippines by multinational companies which are engaged in any of the following services. So ito yung regional operating headquarters. Ginagawa nila yung general administration and planning, business planning and coordination, sourcing and procurement of raw materials and components, corporate finance advisory services, marketing, control and sales promotion, training and personnel management, logistics, research and development, services and product development, technical support and maintenance, data processing and communications, and business development. At yung huli nating i-define na term is yung long-term deposit or investment certificates. This shall refer to certificate of time deposit or investment in the form of savings, common or individual trust funds, deposits, substitutes, investment management accounts, and other investments with a maturity period of not less than 5 years. So, hindi bababa sa 5 taon ang kanyang maturity. The form of which shall be prescribed by the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas and issued by banks only to individuals in denominations of 10,000 pesos and other denominations as may be prescribed by the Bangko Sentral. Magpapahinga muna tayo at susubukan pa nating tumungo sa Section 23 and others. Okay? Diyan lang kayo. Okay, tuloy na natin ito. Basa-basahin natin, no? Chapter 2 ng ano pa rin, National Internal Revenue Code pa rin. Ito sa Section 23 kasi wala pa namang pinagbago, sa basahin natin. General Principles of Income Taxation in the Philippines. Except when otherwise provided in this code. Letter A. A citizen of the Philippines residing therein is taxable on all income derived from sources within and without the Philippines. Ibig sabihin, yung isang Filipino citizen ay binubuwisan sa kanyang mga kinikita dito sa Pilipinas at kung may kita man siya sa ibang bansa. Letter B. A non-resident citizen is taxable only on income derived from sources within the Philippines. Okay. Letter C. An individual citizen of the Philippines who is working and deriving income from abroad as an overseas contract worker is taxable only on income derived from sources within the Philippines. Tama naman yon. Provided that a seaman who is a citizen of the Philippines and who receives compensation for services rendered abroad as a member of the complement of a vessel engaged exclusively in international trade shall be treated as an overseas contract worker. An alien individual, whether a resident or not of the Philippines, is taxable only on income derived from sources within the Philippines. So para sila ng non-resident citizen, taxable lamang sila sa income nila sa Pilipinas. And letter E, a domestic corporation is taxable on all income derived from sources within. Kita nila dito, and yung kinikita man nila kung sakali man sa ibang bansa. And letter F, a foreign corporation, whether engaged or not in trade or business in the Philippines, is taxable only on income derived from sources within the Philippines. Okay, Chapter 3, Tax on Individuals. Ayan, Section 24 na ito. So, dito merong pagbabagong dinulot dun sa mga table to ang train law. Basahin muna natin siya. Letter A, rates of income tax on individual citizen and individual resident alien of the Philippines. Okay, an income tax is hereby imposed. Letter A, on the taxable income defined in Section 31 of this code, other than income subject to tax under subsections B, C, and D of this section, derived for each taxable year from all sources within and without the Philippines, be every individual citizen of the Philippines residing therein. Letter B, on the taxable income defined in Section 31 of this code, other than income subject to tax under Sections B and C and D of this section, derived for each taxable year from all sources within the Philippines by an individual citizen of the Philippines who is residing outside of the Philippines, including overseas contract workers referred to in subsection C of Section 23 hereof. And letter C, on the taxable income derived in Section 31 of this code, other than income subject to tax under subsections B, C, and D of this section, derived for each taxable year from sources within the Philippines by an individual alien who is a resident of the Philippines. Okay, ito na yung may pagbabago ng train dun sa number 2 ng Section 24. Rates of tax on taxable income of individuals. The tax shall be computed in accordance with and at the rates established in the following schedule. So ito yung tax schedule effective January 1, 2018 until December 31, 2022. Sabi niya, not over 250,000. 0%. 0% tax. Taxable income ito kapag ang kinikita mo ay 250,000 mula January 1, 2018 hanggang sa katapusan, hanggang sa December noon, o mula January 1, 2022 hanggang December 31, 2022, ang kinikita mo ay 250,000, 0%. Kapag lalagpas ng 250,000 ang kita mo sa isang taon pero hindi naman hihigit sa 400,000, 20% daw of the excess over 250,000, yun ang income tax mo. Tama ba? So kung kunwari 200 kunwari 280,000 ang kinita mo. Hindi over 250 pero hindi lalagpas ng 400. So ano ba yung 20% ng 30,000? Kasi 'di ba 280 ang example natin. Ano yung so yung 30,000, ano yung 20% nun? Yun ang buwis mo. Kung naman sa sobra ka daw sa 400,000 ang kita mo sa isang taon pero hindi naman lalagpas sa 800,000. Ang mangyayari ay 30,000 daw plus 25% of the excess over 400,000. Kung kunwari ang kita mo ay 430,000, yun ay lumagpas ng 400,000 pero hindi naman lumagpas ng 800,000. So kung 430,000 ang kita mo ay 30,000 plus 430 example natin, ano yung 25% ng 30? So yun ang buwis mo. Kung ikaw naman ay lalagpas ng 800,000 pero hindi naman lalagpas ng 2 million, ang magiging buwis mo ay 130,000 plus 30% of the excess over 800,000. Ay, sorry. Oo, tama. Tama. Plus 30% of the excess over 800,000. Kung over 2 million naman ang kinikita mo sa isang taon pero hindi naman lalagpas ng 8 million, ang magiging buwis mo ay 490,000 plus 32% of the excess over 2 million. Kung over 8 million naman ang kita mo, ang magiging buwis mo ay 2,410,000 plus 35% of the excess over 8 million. So ito ang tax schedule effective January 1, 2018 hanggang December 31, 2022. O letter B, under train law to ha. Tax schedule effective January 1, 2023 and onwards. Ito na yung mangyayari pag 2023 onwards. Pagka hindi lalagpas ng 250,000 ang iyong kita buong taon, ang income tax mo ay 0%. Kasi taxable income on individuals ito Lalagpas naman ng pagka lalagpas ng 250,000 a year ang kita mo pero hindi naman lalagpas ng 400,000, 15% of the excess over 250,000. Lalagpas naman ng 400,000 yung kita mo pero hindi lalagpas ng 800,000. 22,000 plus 20%. Okay, 22,000 plus 20% of the excess over 400,000. Lalagpas ng 800,000 yung kita mo pero hindi naman lalagpas ng 2 million. Ang magiging buwis mo ay 102,500 pesos plus 25% of the excess over 800,000. Lalagpas ng 2 milyon ang kita mo sa isang taon pero hindi naman lalagpas ng 8 milyon. So ang buwis mo ay 402,500 plus 30% of the excess over 2 million. Kung kumikita ka naman ng higit sa 8 milyon sa isang taon. So, 2,202,500 plus 35% of the excess over 8 million, yun ang iyong magiging buwis. So, ang hirap din pala maging mayaman, ano? Pag mayaman ka, laki. For married individuals, the husband and wife, subject to the provision of Section 51D hereof, shall compute separately their individual income tax based on their respective total taxable income, provided that if any income cannot be definitely attributed to or identified as exclusively earned or realized by either of the spouses, the same shall be divided equally between the spouses for the purpose of determining their respective taxable income. Provided that minimum wage earners are as defined in Section 22HH of this Code shall be exempt from the payment of income tax on their taxable income, provided further that the holiday pay, overtime pay, night shift differential pay, and hazard pay received by such minimum wage earners shall likewise be exempt from income tax. Letter B, ito naman, tax ano pa rin to? Train law to. Rate of tax on income of purely self-employed individuals and or professionals whose gross sales or gross receipts and other non-operating income does not exceed the value added tax, the VAT threshold as provided in Section 109BB. Self-employed individuals and or professionals shall have the option to avail of an 8% tax on gross sales. So meron silang may kapangyarihan pumili ng yung mga self-employed individuals and or professionals. Meron silang option to avail itong 8% tax on gross sales or gross receipts and other non-operating income in excess o yung susobra sa 250,000 pesos. In lieu of the graduated income tax sales under subsection A2A of this section and the percentage tax under section 116 of this code. So pwede pala yun, no? Pwede silang mamili na 8% tax on gross sales or gross receipts and other non-operating income in excess of 250,000. Kasi kung kunwari 1 million ang kinita mo, exemption mo na lang yung 250,000. So ano ba yung in excess ng 250,000 mo kung 1 million ang kinita mo? Di 750,000. So 8% ng 750,000, no? Letter C, rate of tax of mixed income earners. So taxpayers earning both compensation income and income from business or practice of profession shall be subject to the following taxes. Number 1, all income from compensation, the rates prescribed under subsection A2A of this section. Ikalawa naman, all income from business or practice of profession. A, if total sales and or gross receipts and other non-operating income do not exceed the VAT threshold as provided in section 109BB of this code, the rates prescribed under subsection A2A of this section on taxable income or 8% income tax based in gross sales or gross receipts and other non-operating income in lieu of the graduated income tax rates under subsection A2A of this section and the percentage tax under section 116 of this code. Okay, letter B naman. Doon pa rin sa mga income from business or practice of profession. If yung total gross sales mo and gross receipts and other non-operating income exceeds the VAT threshold as provided in section 109BB of this code, the rates prescribed under subsection A2A of this code. Okay, so yun ang pagbubuwis doon. Hindi ko nga lang alam, hindi pa natin nababasa yung mga VAT something na yan. O magpunta na tayo sa letter B ng ano pa rin, section 12 pa rin to. Rate of tax on certain passive income. Ano ba yung mga passive income? Interest, royalties, prizes, and other winnings. Sabi dito, a final tax at the rate of 20% is hereby imposed upon the amount of interest from any currency bank deposit and yield or any other monetary benefit from deposit substitutes and from trust funds and similar arrangements. Royalties except on books as well as other literary works and musical compositions which shall be imposed a final tax of 10%. Yun siya. So, final tax of 20% kapag upon the amount of interest from any currency bank deposit. Final tax of 10% naman para sa mga literary works and musical compositions, no? Yung mga royalties nila. Maliban na lamang daw sa books. Ulitin natin. So, ulitin natin ha. Medyo naguluhan ako eh. So, a final tax at the rate of 20% is hereby imposed upon the amount of interest from any currency, bank deposits, and yield or any other monetary benefit from deposit substitutes and from trust funds and similar arrangements. Yun naman daw mga royalties, except maliban sa books, as well as other literary works and musical compositions, which shall be imposed a final tax of 10%. Okay. So, yung mga books, musical compositions, works, 10% yan. Royalties, trust funds, substitutes, 20% sila. Prizes, except prizes amounting to 10,000 pesos or less, shall be subject to a tax under subsection A of section 24 and other winnings, except winnings amounting to 10,000 pesos or less from the PCSO and Lotto which shall be exempt. So kung ang winnings mo sa Lotto o sa sweepstakes 10,000 pababa, wala yung buwis. Derived from sources within the Philippines, provided however that interest income received by an individual taxpayer except a non-resident from a depository bank under the expanded foreign currency deposit system shall be subject to a final income tax rate of 15% of such interest income. Provided further that interest income from long-term deposit or investment in the form of savings, common or individual trust funds, deposit substitutes, investment management accounts, and other investments evidenced by certificates in such form prescribed by the BSP shall be exempt from the tax imposed under this subsection. Provided finally that should the holder of the certificate pre-terminate the deposit or investment before the fifth year, a final tax shall be imposed on the entire income and shall be deducted and withheld by the depository bank from the proceeds of the long-term deposit or investment certificate based on the remaining maturity thereof. For 4 years to less than 5 years, 5%. 3 years to less than 4 years, 12%. And pagka less than 3 years naman, 20% daw. Okay. Ito yung mga proceeds of long-term investment. No? Number 2, Section 24 pa rin tayo. Nako, abutin tayo ng siyam-siyam basta tapusin itong National Internal Revenue Code together with the train law. Ano? Cash and or property dividends. A final tax at the rate of 10% daw shall be imposed upon the cash and or property dividends actually or constructively received by an individual from a domestic corporation or from a joint stock company, insurance or mutual fund companies, and regional operating headquarters of multinational companies, or on the share of a general professional partnership, of which he is a partner, or on the share of an individual in the net income after tax of an association, a joint account, or a joint venture or consortium, taxable as a corporation of which he is a member or co-venturer. Punta naman tayo sa letter C ng Section 24 pa rin, no? Capital gains from sale of shares of stock not traded in the stock exchange. The provisions of Section 39B, notwithstanding a final tax at the rate of 15%, ayan na yung bago, 15% na nilagay ng train law, is hereby imposed upon the net capital gains realized during the taxable year from the sale, barter, exchange, or other disposition of shares of stock in a domestic corporation, except shares sold or disposed through the stock exchange. Ito, 15% ang final tax mo. Kung nagbenta ka kunwari ng subject yun sa 15% yung pagbebenta ng shares of stock na hindi traded, not traded in the stock exchange. Letter D, capital gains from sale of real property. So in general, the provisions of Section 39B, notwithstanding a final tax of 6% based on the gross selling price or current fair market value as determined in accordance with Section 6E of this code, whichever is higher, ano daw mas mataas, is hereby imposed, final tax of 6%, is hereby imposed upon capital gains presumed to have been realized from sale, exchange, or other disposition of real property located in the Philippines, classified as capital assets. Ito yung mga lupain na hindi naman ginagamit sa negosyo, including pacto de retro sales and other forms of conditional sales by individuals, including estates and trusts, provided that the tax liability, kung meron man, on gains from sales or other dispositions of real property to the government or any of its political subdivisions or agencies or to government-owned or controlled corporations shall be determined either under 24A or under this subsection at the option of the taxpayer. Number 2, ano yung exception? The provisions of paragraph 1 of this subsection, to the contrary, notwithstanding capital gains presumed to have been realized from the sale or disposal of residence by natural persons, the process of which is fully utilized in acquiring or constructing a new principal residence within 18 calendar months from the date of sale or shall be exempt from the capital gains tax imposed under this subsection, provided that the historical cost or adjusted basis of the real property sold or disposed shall be carried over to the new principal residence built or acquired, provided further that the Commission shall have been duly notified by the taxpayer within 30 days from the date of sale or disposition through a prescribed return of his intention to avail of the tax exemption herein mentioned, Provided still further that the said tax exemption can only be availed of once every 10 years. Provided finally that if there is no full utilization of the process of sale or disposition, the portion of the gain presumed to have been realized from the sale or disposition shall be subject to capital gains tax. Okay, ulitin nga natin. Capital gains tax ay 6%, no? For this purpose, the gross selling price or fair market value at the time of the sale, whichever is higher, ano daw yung mas mataas do sa fair market value o yung selling price, shall be multiplied by a fraction which the unutilized amount bears to the gross selling price in order to determine the taxable portion, and the tax prescribed under paragraph 1 of this subsection shall be imposed thereon. Ang haba ng section 24, ha? Sobrang haba. Basahin naman natin yung section 25 kasi may pagbabago rin na dinulot ang train law yata dito eh. Saan ba yung pagbabagong dinulot niya? Section 25. Parang wala naman. Pero basahin na rin natin section 25. A non-resident alien. Okay, ang pag-uusapan natin dito, tax on non-resident alien individual. A non-resident alien engaged in trade or business within the Philippines. So in general daw, a non-resident alien individual engaged in trade or business in the Philippines shall be subject to an income tax in the same manner as an individual citizen and the resident alien individual on taxable income received from all sources within the Philippines. So malinaw yun, ha? All sources within the Philippines. A non-resident alien individual who shall come to the Philippines and stay therein for an aggregate period of more than 180 days. 180 days siya dito kahit paputol-putol. Aggregate period daw eh. Ibig sabihin, pinagsama-sama, 180 days siya dito. During any calendar year shall be deemed a non-resident alien doing business in the Philippines. Section 22G of the notwithstanding. Okay, so 180 days na nagstay rito si non-resident alien, he shall be deemed a non-resident alien doing business in the Philippines. Ikalawa, cash and or property dividends from a domestic corporation or from a joint stock company or from an insurance or mutual fund company or from a regional operating headquarter of multinational company or the share of a non-resident alien individual in the distributable net income after tax of a partnership, hindi kasali yung professional general partnership, of which he is a partner, or the share of a non-resident alien individual in the net income after tax of an association, a joint account or a joint venture taxable as a corporation of which he is a member or a co-venturer, interests, royalties in any form, and prizes except prizes amounting to 10,000 pesos or less, which shall be subject to tax under subsection B1 of section 24, and other winnings except Philippine charity sweepstakes and lotto winnings shall be subject to an income tax of 20% on the total amount thereof. Okay. Okay, hindi lang kasama syempre yung 10,000 na winnings, ha. Wala, non-taxable yun eh. Hindi rin kasama yung winnings sa PCSO and lotto winnings. Yung mga ibang prizes na yun, subject to an income tax of 20% on the total amount thereof. Provided, however, that royalties on books as well as other literary works and royalties on musical compositions shall be subject to a final tax of 10%. Ayan, nabasa natin yan eh. Kanina, 10% of the total amount thereof. Provided further that cinematographic films and similar works shall be subject to the tax provided under Section 28 of this Code. Provided further that interest income from long-term deposit or investment in the form of savings, common or individual trust funds, deposit substitutes, investment management accounts, and other investments evidenced by certificates in such form prescribed by the BSP shall be exempt from the tax imposed under this subsection. Provided finally that should the holder of the certificate pre-terminate the deposit or investment before the 5th year, a final tax shall be imposed on the entire income and shall be deducted and withheld by the depository bank from the proceeds of the long-term deposit or investment certificate based on the remaining maturity thereof. Ito yung pagbabasehan niya. 4 na taon or less, 4 years to less than 5 years, 5%. Okay? Ito yung basehan niya. So, 4 years to less than 5 years, hindi umabot ng 5th year, nag-pre-terminate na siya, 5%. 3 years to less than 4 years, 12%. Less than 3 years, 20%. Okay. Ang final tax. Tungo naman tayo sa capital gains. No, capital gains realized from sale, barter, exchange of shares of stock in domestic corporations not traded through the local stock exchange. Hindi siya traded sa local stock exchange. At yung real properties daw shall be subject to the tax prescribed under Section C, D of Section 24. Ito yata yung 6%, no? Letter B, non-resident alien individual not engaged in trade or business within the Philippines. There shall be levied, collected, and paid for each taxable year upon the entire income received from all sources within the Philippines by every non-resident alien individual not engaged in trade or business within the Philippines as interest, cash and or property dividends, rents, salaries, wages, premiums, annuities, compensation, remuneration, emoluments, or other fixed or determinable annual or periodic or casual gains, profits and income and capital gains. A tax equal to 25% of such income, capital gains realized by a non-resident alien individual not engaged in trade or business in the Philippines from the sale of shares of stock in any domestic corporation and real property shall be subject to the income tax prescribed under subsection C and D of Section 24. Letter C. Ano pa rin to Section 25. Sabi, there shall be levied, collected, and paid for each taxable year upon the gross income received by every alien individual employed by regional or area headquarters and regional operating headquarters established in the Philippines by multinational companies as salaries, wages, annuities, compensation, remuneration, and other emoluments such as honoraria and allowances from such regional or area headquarters and regional operating headquarters, a tax equal to 15% of such gross income. So yung mga alien individual employed by regional or area headquarters and regional operating headquarters ng multinational companies, subject sila sa tax equal to 15%. Yung kanilang mga compensation, remuneration, etc. However, that the same tax treatment shall apply to Filipinos employed and occupying the same position as those of aliens employed by these multinational companies. So kung Pilipino ka, tapos pareho naman kayo ng posisyon, subject ka rin sa ganong buwis. For purposes of this chapter, the term multinational company means a foreign firm or entity engaged in international trade with affiliates or subsidiaries or branch offices in the Asia-Pacific region and other foreign markets. Haba nitong 24 and 25, Section 24 and 25. Letter D. Okay. Alien individual employed by offshore banking units. There shall be levied, collected, and paid for each taxable year upon the gross income received by every alien individual employed by offshore banking units established in the Philippines as salaries, wages, annuities, compensation, remuneration, and other emoluments, such as honoraria and allowances from such offshore banking units, a tax equal to 15% of such gross income, provided, however, that the same tax treatment shall apply to Filipinos employed and occupying the same positions as those of aliens employed by these offshore banking units. Parehas lang, kung parehas lang kayo ng posisyon, kahit Pilipino tayo, parehas lang tayo na subject lahat ng kita sa 15%. Basta yung mga offshore banking, alien individual o na employed by offshore banking dito, o yung mga alien individual employed ng mga multinational companies dito, 15%, no? O letter E, alien individual employed by petroleum service contractor and subcontractor. An alien individual is a permanent resident of a foreign country but who is employed and assigned in the Philippines by a foreign service contractor or by a foreign service subcontractor engaged in petroleum operations in the Philippines shall be liable to a tax of 15% of the salaries, wages, annuities, compensation, remuneration, and other emoluments such as honoraria and allowances received from such contractor or subcontractor, provided, however, that the same tax treatment shall apply to a Filipino employed and occupying the same position as an alien employed by petroleum service contractor and subcontractor. Any income from all other sources within the Philippines by the alien employees referred to under subsection C, D, and E hereof shall be subject to the pertinent income tax as the case may be imposed under this code. So kaya pala sinama tong section 25 ng National Internal Revenue Code na naapektuhan di umano ng train law ay meron pala kasing provision na vinito o yung hindi inaprubahan ng Pangulo, no? Section 25. So tingnan nga natin kung kaya pa natin basahin section 26, no? Kung maikli lang. Section 26, maikli nga lang. Tax liability of members of general professional partnerships. O kasi lagi nating nababanggit to na hindi sila kasama, di ba? Yung sa mga corporations. Sabi rito, a general professional partnership as such shall not be subject to the income tax imposed under this chapter. Persons engaging in business as partners in a general professional partnership, ang example natin dito, yung mga lawyers, sa law firm, partners sila, o yung mga accountants, CPA, no? Na kumikita lamang sila based on the practice of their profession, shall be liable for income tax only in their separate and individual capacities. For purposes of computing the distributive share of the partners, the net income of the partnership shall be computed in the same manner as a corporation. Each partner shall report as gross income his distributive share actually or constructively received in the net income of the partnership. Tingnan natin kung kaya pa natin basahin yung section 27 kasi ano to merong epekto yung train law dito mahaba na to. Kaya pa ba to? Mahaba na to. Section 27. Sige, basahin na natin. Rates of income tax on domestic corporations. Sabi rito, in general, except as otherwise provided in this code, an income tax of 35% is hereby imposed upon the taxable income derived during each taxable year from all sources within and without the Philippines by every corporation as defined in Section 22B of this code and taxable under this title as a corporation organized in or existing under the laws of the Philippines, provided that effective January 1, 2009, the rate of income tax shall be 30%. Okay? So, yung mga korporasyon daw, dati 35% sila, pero effective January 29, 30% ang tax sa lahat ng kinikita nila within, sa loob at labas ng ating bansa. In the case of corporations adopting the fiscal year accounting period, the taxable income shall be computed without regard to the specific date when specific sales, purchases, and other transactions occur. Their income and expenses for the fiscal year shall be deemed to have been earned and spent equally for each month of the period. The corporate income tax rate shall be applied on the amount computed by multiplying the number of months covered by the new rate within the fiscal year by the taxable income of the corporation for the period divided by 12. Okay. Multiplying the number of months, sabi niya, covered by the new rate within the fiscal year by the taxable income of the corporation divided by 12. Provided further that the President, upon the recommendation of the Secretary of Finance, may effective January 1, 2000, year 2000, allow corporations the option to be taxed at 15% of gross income as defined herein after the following conditions have been satisfied. Ito yung mga kondisyon na yan. Number 1, a tax effort ratio of 20% of gross national product. Number 2, a ratio of 40% of income tax collection to total tax revenues. Number 3, a VAT tax effort of 4% of GNP. And number 4, a 0.9% ratio of the consolidated public sector financial position o yung CPSFP to GNP. The option to be taxed based on gross income shall be available only to firms whose ratio of cost of sales to gross sales or receipts from all sources does not exceed, hindi lumalagpas sa 55%. The election of the gross income tax option by the corporation shall be irrevocable for 3 consecutive taxable years during which the corporation is qualified under the scheme. For purposes of this section, the term gross income derived from business shall be equivalent to gross sales less sales returns, discounts and allowances, and cost of goods sold. So yun yung gross income, no? Cost of goods sold shall include all business expenses directly incurred to produce the merchandise to bring them to their present location and use. For a trading or merchandising concern, cost of goods sold shall include the invoice cost of the goods sold plus import duties, freight in transporting the goods, including insurance while the goods are in transit. For a manufacturing concern, a cost of goods manufactured and sold shall include all costs of production of finished goods such as raw materials used, direct labor and manufacturing overhead, freight cost, insurance premiums and other costs incurred to bring the raw materials to the factory or warehouse. In the case of taxpayers engaged in the sale of service, gross income means gross receipts less sales returns. So gross receipts less sales returns, allowances, and discounts. Yun pala ang ibig sabihin ng gross income. Gross receipts less sales returns and allowances and discounts. Letter B ng section 27 pa rin. Proprietary educational institutions and hospitals which are non-profit shall pay a tax of 10% of their taxable income, except those covered by subsection D hereof, provided that if the gross income from unrelated trade, business, or other activity exceeds 50% of the total gross income derived by such educational institutions or hospitals from all sources, the tax prescribed in subsection A hereof shall be imposed on the entire taxable income. Bakit naman bubuwisan sila? Sinabi natin non-profit sila. Kasi kunwari yung isang school, nagpapaupa na siya ng kanyang bahagi ng building niya na hindi naman related, di ba? Sa kanyang pagiging non-profit educational institution, kumikita na siya sa ibang pamamaraan. So siya ay magiging taxable na. Sabi pa rito at lumagpas yung kita niya sa 50% of the total gross income derived. Yun ang ibig sabihin nun. For purposes of this subsection, the term unrelated trade, business or other activity means any trade, business or other activity, the conduct of which is not substantially related to the exercise or performance by such educational institution or hospital of its primary purpose or function. Yan yung sinabi ko. A proprietary educational institution is any private school maintained and administered by private individuals or groups with an issued permit to operate from the Department of Education, Culture, and Sports, DepEd na yan ngayon, or Commission on Higher Education, yung CHED, or the TESDA, Technical Education and Skills Development Authority, as the case may be, in accordance with existing laws. Merong binura dito yung train law, so basahin natin ng hindi nakasama yung binura. Letter C, government-owned or controlled corporations, agencies, or instrumentalities. The provisions of existing special or general laws, to the contrary, notwithstanding all corporations, agencies, or instrumentalities owned or controlled by the government, except the GSIS, the Social Security System, SSS, the PhilHealth, PHIC, and the local water districts, shall pay such rate of tax upon their taxable income as are imposed by this section upon corporations or associations engaged in similar business, industry, or activity. Yung mga PCSO, yung gaming, di na sila kasama. Ang hindi na lang magbabayad daw ng buwis, no? Ang hindi na lang magbabayad nitong Hindi na ang exception na lang ay yung GSIS, SSS, PhilHealth at local water districts. Letter D. Rates of tax on certain passive incomes. Number 1, interest from deposits and yield or any other monetary benefit from deposit substitutes and from trust funds and similar arrangements and royalties. A final tax at the rate of 20% is hereby imposed upon the amount of interest on currency bank deposit and yield or any other monetary benefit from deposit substitutes and from trust funds and similar arrangements received by domestic corporations and royalties derived from sources within the Philippines. Provided, however, that interest income derived by a domestic corporation from a depository bank under the expanded foreign currency deposit system shall be subject to a final income tax at the rate of 15% of such interest income. Number 2, capital gains from the sale of shares of stock not traded in the stock exchange. The final tax at the rate of 15% shall be imposed on the net capital gains realized during the taxable year from the sale, exchange, or other disposition of shares of stock in a domestic corporation except shares sold or disposed through the stock exchange. So, ang nilagay niya rito, final tax rate ng 15% para sa disposition ng stocks. No? Okay. Number 3, tax on income derived under the expanded foreign currency deposit system. Naku, ang haba pa. Okay, saan na to? Sabi lang dito, income derived by a depository bank under the expanded foreign currency deposit system from foreign currency transactions with non-resident offshore banking units in the Philippines. Local commercial banks, including branches of foreign banks, may be authorized by the BSP to transact business with foreign currency deposit system. Shall be exempt sila from all taxes, maliban lang daw or except net income from such transactions as may be specified by the Secretary of Finance. Intercorporate dividends. Dividends received by a domestic corporation from another domestic corporation shall not be subject to tax. Dividendo ng, kunwari, korporasyon ko, nanguha ako ng dividendo sa'yo. Hindi raw yung subject sa tax. Capital gains realized from the sale, exchange, or disposition of land and or buildings. A final tax of 6% is hereby imposed on the gain presumed to have been realized on the sale, exchange, disposition of lands and or buildings which are not actually used in business of a corporation. Kasi not actually used in business. Pag actually used in business, ang tawag doon, ordinary asset. So, capital gains para sa capital transaction, no? Minimum corporate income tax on domestic corporations. A minimum corporate income tax of 2% of the gross income as of the end of the taxable year, as defined herein, is hereby imposed on a corporation taxable under this title beginning on the 4th taxable year immediately following the year in which such corporation commences business operations, when the minimum income tax is greater than the tax computed under subsection A of this section for the taxable year. Carry forward of excess minimum tax. Ano naman ito? Any excess of the minimum corporate income tax over the normal income tax as computed under subsection A of this section shall be carried forward and credited against the normal income tax for the 3 immediately succeeding taxable years. Ano naman to? The Secretary of Finance is hereby authorized to suspend the imposition of the minimum corporate income tax on any corporation which suffers losses on account of prolonged labor dispute or because of force majeure or because of legitimate business reverses. So may karapatan si Secretary of Finance na mag-authorize ng suspension ng imposition ng corporate income tax, no, of the minimum corporate income tax. Kapag naman mayroong binagyo, force majeure, prolonged labor dispute, yan, kapangyarihan yan ng Secretary of Finance. Authorized din yung Secretary of Finance na mag-promulgate upon the recommendation of the Commissioner ng rules and regulations that shall define the terms and conditions under which he may suspend the imposition of the minimum corporate income tax in a meritorious case. Gross income naman, ano ito? For purposes of applying the minimum corporate income tax provided under subsection E hereof, the term gross income shall mean gross sales less sales returns, discounts and allowances, and cost of goods sold. Cost of goods sold shall include all business expenses directly incurred to produce the merchandise to bring them to their present location and use. For trading or merchandising concern, cost of goods sold shall include the invoice cost, freight and transporting cost, import duties, ayan, kasali yan. Okay, so doon tayo nagtatapos ngayon, no? Tinapos natin hanggang section 27. Tinapos natin hanggang section 27 kung saan meron ng mga pagbabago. So binabasa natin yung National Internal Revenue Code kasama yung mga pagbabago na idinulot ng ating train law. So doon tayo nagtatapos, no? Mag-pray muna tayo. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. And with the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. So samahan niyo ulit ako magbasa next time. Subukan nating tapusin, basahin yung buong National Internal Revenue Code kasama ang train law. So God bless.